Okay, ever have one of those days where everything is going haywire? I am 8 minutes late coming on because my Wi Fi was refusing to cooperate with me for whatever reason. So, my apologies for the late time. And I'm just getting ready here to come on. This is going to be very impromptu right now. It's been a busy day with art assignments, some work for the wonderful Dr. Whimsy Anderson, who is going to be leaving for Israel for the next 3 weeks. I'm trying to um, help her with loose ends, talking to patients, clients, basically acting as her buffer and firewall and ambassador in between so she can have a good, safe journey abroad tomorrow. I wish her so well, and I'm going to miss not doing Taco Tuesdays with her for the next 2 weeks. That's a great joy of mine. I love doing that show with her. It's a lot more serious than this one, a lot different. Sometimes it gets silly because we can't help ourselves, but generally we talk about a lot of current events, and that in itself is a lot. It's a lot. But hey, Ward, greetings to you. Thank you for joining. Thank you for your loyalty here. And thank you. You put her in your prayers while she's in that part of the world. I've been talking to a lot of her people on the phone all over the country, and Whimsy is very loved. And I'm hearing that continually from people that they're going to be praying for her and sending her good energy. And Ward, thank you for that. I will pass that on to Whimsy tonight when I send her a message, kind of summarizing the day. People have very sweet things to say, and I know it lifts her spirits, and she appreciates it. And Israel is such a big part of her heart. She has dual citizenship, and she cares deeply about the people there. So she tries to get back there at least once a year or so, sometimes faster. And so that's been my day so far. I'm even looking at my hair right now. Wow, I should have fixed it a little before I got on the air here. And look at this. There we go. Lift the light up. Oh, that's a little better. That looks a tad more professional, I hope. We'll wait for some more people to come on board here to see if anybody has any topics for discussion. I hope you had a good Easter. For me, it was simple, low key, with some friends, and me being the inveterate workaholic, I came home and got back to several assignments I have. I have several art projects, and there's one for a person who's fairly well known, and I'm not at liberty to talk about it because I want to respect his privacy, and it's a business deal, so I'm being very, very respectful there, but I'm giving my all to that as well. And just trying to get my affairs in order here and stay on top of stuff. We just finished a Mercury retrograde. We just finished a Venus retrograde. So supposedly things are supposed to be getting easier, at least for my zodiac sign of Cancer. If Joyce Petrus were on here, our resident astrologer, she could maybe elaborate a little further on that. But I was listening to an astrologer on YouTube saying he originally said that this was supposed to be an extraordinary year for cancers. Well, thus far, it hasn't, at least for most cancers, and he even said that himself. Somebody claimed that now that Mars has moved out of our sign, we're going to start to see things get easier. Things are going to, picking up, progressing. I'm all for that. Because sometimes I have this feeling that I'm like a race car spinning my wheels in the mud at 120 miles an hour and not going anywhere. But I certainly try my best. And this is one of my projects here right now. Let's see what I gave Mama an orchid and some chocolate covered toffee along with a card. Oh, that's so sweet. Yeah, my dear mother passed away in 2003, and my dad has been gone since 2009. And I'll share with you, my parents had me really late in life. I was like one of those, if we don't do it now, that biological, not just the biological clock, the biological calendar, everything was running out. So my only sister and I mentioned this before, we're spaced 14 years apart. We're the only kids in the family. But my father, a few days ago, if he were still around, would have been 105 years old. And that just blows me away. Blows me away. I can't even fathom my dad being 105 years old. In fact, my dad probably couldn't have fathomed it either. I think by the time he left, 89, close to 90, he knew he'd had a really good life and it was time to move on to bigger and better things, which is what I believe we do. But gosh, if I'd known I was going to mention this, this is how spontaneous this is. I have something framed, but it's not accessible. My dad told me that when he left home at the age of 18, 1938, to go to college, he put a $5 bill in the back of his wallet. Now, $5 may not sound like much, but I looked it up in 1938. $5 was worth, I think, something like $83 or something in today's currency. It was a lot more. Let's just say it was close to $100. That was his emergency money. If he ever got in any kind of trouble, if he ever had to come home, meaning back to his mother and father on the farm in West Virginia, he had that $5 bill in the back of his wallet. Well, my dad didn't tell me until this long after I was grown that he proceeded to keep that $5 bill in the back of every wallet he ever owned, that same original $5 bill. And just in case of emergency. And of course, over the years, that $5 bill devalued and devalued and devalued, but he kept it. And this was when I think I was like 33 years old or something at the time. And he said, well, that $5 bill is still in my wallet. So near the end of his life, I asked my dad if I could have it. And I keep it framed on my wall with a picture of him. It's just the $5 bill. It is dirty and grungy and disgusting and doesn't even look like a piece of money anymore. But I know what it meant to my father, and it was a good luck charm. It kept him safe. Or sometimes when we just believe something will keep us safe, that's enough. It's like that saying about the magic feather. If you have this magic feather, you will always be safe, even if it is just a placebo type of thing. Anyway, I think it always made my father feel secure. And it was sweet. He was a good man, very good man. I'll admit, I was a snot-nosed kid. I was arrogant. I didn't always appreciate my father for how wonderful he really was. But I do now, because my father had some of the strongest morals of anyone I have ever known in my life. It was very intrinsic to him, just very basic, like salt of the earth, no pretense. It just was who he was. And many a time now, when I'm in a little bind or something, or say a moral dilemma, I truly ask myself, what would my father have done? How would my father have handled this? And I don't say that just because he was my dad. I say it because that's who he was. Still waiting for some more people here, Ward. I don't know if maybe I got on too late today. Maybe people are not going to join today. I don't know. I hope they come through. Hope people get notices. If not, that's okay too. I get a lot of people come and watch the show afterwards. I admit I don't always check my numbers or demographics or anything like that. I was doing that when I first began this channel, year and 3/4 ago. This summer will make 2 years. And in the beginning, I was always all the figures, demographics, who am I reaching, target audience, subscribers, and all that. And I got to a point of serious burnout. Like I've talked about, the reason I haven't made any new videos for quite a while, because it's just a lot of hard work. And it got to where I was putting 8 to 10 hours a day into this YouTube channel. not making any money off of it either. It was almost like a career that wasn't paying anything. And not that that was my criteria, but it was just a lot of work, and it was taking away from my other things, my art, my writing, just I can even just leisure time. I felt like I was working and working and working and working between my regular job responsibilities and then doing the YouTube channel. So I guess what I'm trying to say, it's just very liberating to get on, do this show on Mondays, just be very freeform about it, no planning, wonderful people like yourself, like you, Ward, people who have comments, suggestions, topics, and then we just have a little fun with it. And I know that a lot of people do watch this show later when it's archived, but I don't always even bother to look. My dear friend Pam of Pomona Remembers, my friend in British Columbia, she has a wonderful exercise. She said, just take whatever your issue is and imagine blowing up a red balloon and just releasing it out in the universe and letting the universe, our guides, our spirits, our angels, whatever, just take care of it. Just release it. Just put it out there. And if you need to, put another balloon and another balloon until you have a Pixar movie. I love the way she described it that way. So I like this feeling of just sending these shows out into the internet, out into the universe, and letting them land wherever they land, and hopefully they reach the right people. Ward, I've got projects progressing along right now. I don't always talk about stuff publicly because I frankly have had things stolen from me. And I don't want to name names, but I actually had a celebrity twice steal my projects. A celebrity, a well-known celebrity. But that's something I'm keeping private. I'm not going to talk about it here for a number of reasons. But one of my projects is a series of oracle cards. I've always wanted to do that. And I thought, well, if I don't do it now, when is it going to happen? So I'm working on that one right now. When it's completed, I'll announce it on here. I'll announce it on Whimsy's show. I'm hoping to actually do my own printings. It'd be lovely to sell something like this to like a publisher, like Hay House, Louise Hay's publishing company, or New World Publishing, something like that. But I've gone through this so many times trying to publish projects that I think it would be nice just to have something where I have a little more control over it, a little more personal power, a little more control. Oh, wait, what's that word? That's okay. I'm not asking for the 411, just hoping things are moving forward for you. Oh, okay. Yeah, yes, they are. But I'm just talking about what I'm working on. So this is a project that I'm hoping that I can print myself, or at least do my initial printings, and maybe take them around to New Age bookstores, that type of thing, gift shops. I can promote it here on my own channel, Whimsy's channel. I think that would be fun. So I will talk more about that when they're completed, but I'm very, very thick into that. I've also always wanted to design my own tarot card deck. Now that's an ambitious undertaking because there are 78 very specific cards in a deck. I can be a little freer with the Oracle card deck because that's more of my own creation. Tarot, you have to stay within stronger parameters, guidelines. But I think I was entertaining this idea that I was going to complete this in like 6 months, and that just is not going to happen. This is going to be more like a 2 or 3 year project if I'm lucky, even there. I could make them really simple, but anybody who knows my artwork knows I don't work that way. I like to get into a lot of embellished detail, and when I try to scrimp on that, I'm never happy with it. So that's what's happening. And then I often want to redo things because I'm a perfectionist. I am such a perfectionist. I can't help that about myself. But I try to watch it, not to go too far with it, to know that there is beauty in imperfection. There is no such thing as actual perfection, but I like the fact that it's enticing. It's enticing. It's like the carrot on the stick that keeps me moving forward. Maybe I can't ever get that perfection, but I can keep reaching for it and improving myself, doing better, going beyond what I thought were my own limitations. That's a very exciting thing for me whenever I can do that. So that's how I use perfection in a positive way. But I also have spoken to many other artists, writers who tell me they have the same thing, and people have mixed feelings about it. Like, they want to put it down completely, but I feel it can be used as service to oneself. I've always thought if I ever got to meet Barbra Streisand, because I know the woman hates small talk, but if I could ever meet her, I'd love to ask her about perfectionism. If she would be willing to talk about that with me, because she is one of the most notorious perfectionists. Hi, Joyce. Thank you for joining here. But she's one of the most notorious perfectionists. She's been heavily criticized for it. And Barbara herself has said she's tried to not be such a perfectionist. And then she realized, wait a minute, I love being a perfectionist. This is who I am. I'm not going to apologize for this anymore. And I'm actually on the same page with her, because she was giving an interview once where she talked about how extreme she is in her perfectionism. She was mixing one of her albums. She was working with her sound engineer, with the control board with all those different slides and things on there, and there was this one, they were laying down the tracks, and there was this one track. She said, I want you to bring this down like that much of a decibel. And the sound engineer said, Barbara, nobody's going to hear that. The human ear is not going to be able to discern that little of a difference. And she said, no, you're wrong. You may not hear it, but you'll feel it. You will energetically feel it. I thought, that's how I feel myself when I'm doing a painting, a drawing. And sometimes it's like the subtlest little thing, like a little line, a little dash of color that probably no one would notice. But my feeling is energetically, you'll feel it. I feel it. I feel the viewer will sense that also. And where I really became conscious of that was this was in the late 90s, I believe. I went to the LA County Museum of Art, and I saw an exhibition of Van Gogh paintings that were on loan from the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, where it was undergoing renovation for about a year. So this was like one of the biggest and most complete collections of Van Gogh paintings ever seen in America. And these were like some of the most famous, like the sunflowers, Starry Night, the things that we have seen reproduced endlessly on postcards, t-shirts, calendars, posters, books, you name it. But nothing prepared me for being a few feet away from the real thing. I mean, aside from the visual vibrancy that no printing process has ever been able to capture. I don't care how good it is, even with all of our digital technology, nothing captured the vibrancy of those paintings. But what really fascinated me was the energy. I swear to goodness, I could feel waves and waves and waves just coming off of those paintings, hitting me. And I talked to other people who were there, because I thought, am I crazy? Is this just me? And I had other people tell me the same thing. They felt it also. So I'm very conscious now when I make my art. I've been conscious ever since that I'm capturing energy on that canvas or that paper. And I think there's a lot that we get in our subconscious. And that's basically what Barbra Streisand was saying about that little decibel on one of the tracks. She meant subconsciously. You get it, you hear it, you feel it. So anyway, that's what I would love to talk with her someday about. And I should check my comments here. Hey, Joyce, thank you for joining me. Ward, have I seen the latest screen version of Little Women? By that, you mean the one with Meryl Streep, and I think it was directed by Greta Gerwig, I think. Is that the one that came out in 2019? Because that one I have seen. And not only did I see that, I saw it at a screening at the Directors Guild, where the director and the cast members came out on stage for a Q&A. And I'm going to admit, the reason I went was not to see Little Women. It was to see Meryl Streep. Meryl Streep was on stage. And I've mentioned that she's one of the few remaining celebrities I've always wanted to meet. Well, I didn't meet her, but I got to breathe the same air in the room with her, and I got to sit maybe 30 feet away from her and see her clearly on stage. That was a thrill. Yeah, Ward, I knew that about Streisand and the tinnitus in her ears, the ringing. She was saying in her autobiography, because she has a reputation for being a bitch, being difficult. And she was trying to explain, because of that ringing in her ears, sometimes it would just be so irritating and annoying that it would cause her to like snap at people or be a little brusque or a little rude, because she kept insisting in her book, no, I'm not the bitch everyone says I am. But she said that was one of the causes. It's really tormented her, the ringing in her ears. Plus, she has perfect pitch, so she claims, but anybody who's ever listened to Barbra Streisand knows the woman has perfect pitch. So, I mean, she must just have like supersonic hearing, and to have that ringing has to be pure hell. Yeah, it is amazing, isn't it, how she made her music, her singing, so much a part of her life, despite that. And who's to say, maybe it did enhance her in some way, because most of us would agree Barbra Streisand is more than just a great singer. That thing Norman Maine said in A Star Is Born about Judy Garland, it's that little something extra, that little something that can't be defined, that sets them apart. And especially when you're talking to someone like Judy Garland or Barbra Streisand, who was just like a star. They were just in their own league. So who knows how much that tinnitus actually had an effect on the way Barbara would hear things or interpret sounds and notes in her music. I don't know. That'd be another good question to ask her. Though she says she doesn't want to do interviews anymore. And that was last year when she was doing her book tour, the one where she did them all from her house, because she never wants to leave her compound anymore. But she said, I don't have to do interviews anymore. You can just read my book. Well, I've talked to people who tell me she left a lot out of her book. But anyway, that's another story there. Yeah, Sword Van Gogh was extremely intense individual, even amongst artists. Yes, that's a good example. That little something extra. Yes, there are scores of great painters, but only one Van Gogh. Oh my goodness. I wish I could see that exhibit again. Of course, now to do that, I'd have to go to Amsterdam, which I wouldn't mind. I've been to Amsterdam, but it's been many years. I'd love to go back again. There's so many European cities I've visited one time, especially in my youth. My very, very first trip to Europe was actually 40 years ago this week. My very first time. And that's certainly a magical thing for anyone who's ever gone, ever dreamt of doing that as a child. And finally, as a young adult, there you are. As I remember that first day, having been off the plane, had my suitcases and everything, and I was looking for a room to stay in. And I remember just sitting on a park bench in London. And I'm looking around going, wow, I'm here. I did it. It finally sunk in after all of those many, many hours of traveling, flying, and so forth. Wow, I'm here. I remember that hit me again when I went to see a play that night, and I was sitting there in the balcony of the theater waiting for the curtain to go up, and I was saying, I'm here in London in the theater. And anyway, you don't need to hear all that. What's that, Ward? That's the 2019 one. They did a fantastic job showing how the book was put together from inspiration to pen to printing press. Every single step was carefully plotted out. Yeah, that's the one I saw. Yeah, with the whole cast at the Directors Guild. That was a lucky year for me. I'm a member of the Screen Actors Guild, and they do this random thing where it's like a lottery where they pick names to be on the SAG Award nominating committee. And I've talked to some members of SAG who've been members 30, 40, even 50 years who have never been given that honor. Well, my name got drawn that year. So I had invitations constantly to screenings all over town with the directors, with the stars in attendance. I had so many DVD screeners being sent to my door every day. Open my door, there are packages outside filled with DVDs. And it was just about impossible to watch all that because I had my full-time job as well as everything else. And there was one week where I really, really pushed myself, but I couldn't say no to it. Monday night was the film Judy with Renee Zellweger. Got to meet Renee Zellweger after the screening. I'd actually met her years before, but I got to talk to her again. And then, let's see, the night after that was Little Women, Meryl Streep. The night after that was The Irishman with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino in attendance for a Q&A. And then the day after that was the movie about Mr. Rogers. I think it was called It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, but Tom Hanks was there. So I wasn't about to miss any of those screenings, but that was so hard because at the time when I was working my job, we open at 7 a.m. And so for me to get dressed and ready and showered and stuff and drive through the traffic, I had to be up at 4:30 in the morning to go to work. So I'd be going to these screenings, sometimes getting out about 11 o'clock at night, getting home, getting a little bit of sleep, getting up the next morning. I was very tired. I was wiped out. In fact, I was so burned out from going to so many movies. I never thought I would say this, but I had no desire to go to another movie theater for the longest time. I had no desire to watch another movie. And as things happened, this was the end of 2019, early 2020, and we all know what happened in early 2020, a little thing called the pandemic lockdown, and all the movie theaters were shut down and everything. And I'd have people talking, well, I miss going out to a restaurant. I miss going to a movie. I miss this, I miss that. And I was like, I don't miss going to movies. If I don't see another movie for the next 5 years, I'll be happy. and you guys know what a cinephile I am. But that was just saturation that year. But I'm grateful I had the experience. Was this Goddess Val? Hello. And Andy, hi. I haven't even said hi to you guys. Your mom did not understand what the red light district meant. Surprise! She tried covering my eyes and I nearly fell. Oh, yes. You mean the red light district in Amsterdam? Which, when I was there, oh, yes, the red light district where they would have to put it politely, the workers, there would be these windows with these little settings, and the customer would go in and you would see him come into the window and just pull the curtain across. And then about an hour later, the curtain would open again and the client would leave and they'd be ready for more customers. But it was quite something. That and all of the legal marijuana, like it was just everywhere in Amsterdam, like in the coffee houses, sweet shops, pastries. I mean, it was just everywhere, everywhere. And there'd be marijuana leaf signs out on the sidewalk and people growing it in flower pots 3 feet high. It was just completely legal then. I have a very dear friend from Holland, and I was asking him about it, and he said it's a lot of that is gone now. A lot of the the obvious debauchery that made it so much fun. He said that they wanted to try to clean up their image for tourists and make it more family friendly. And I was like, oh, that's what made Amsterdam fun. Anyway, I'll go back again someday. Um, what's this for? If I'm up at 4:30 a.m., I'm running late for work. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about then. And I'm a night person. I am very much a night person. I'm sorry, my hair, I should fix it better. I get my creativity late. I'm very lucky. I work from home now. I set my own hours, and my own hours, many times I'm up till like 2:33 in the morning, but I'm very happy because I'm working, I'm productive, I'm creative. And it's not like I sleep my day away. I'll get up like 9 or 9:30 in the morning. That's fine for me. But I find it ironic. A few nights I have been up that late, like 4:35 in the morning. I'm thinking this is the time I used to be going to bed to go to work. I just flipped everything on its ear. What was that, Andy? Let's see. It was the Emmys or the Oscars, and Big Bird walked around the stage and thought Tom Hanks' name was Thanks. Oh, I don't know what that sounds cute. No, I don't remember that one. Oh yeah, Ward. Driving to work with zero traffic. Yes, I remember that now. During the lockdown, where we were supposed to stay homebound, and I wasn't doing much driving, but the few times I'd get in my car, it was like, "Ooh, this is nice." Well, this is a tad off the subject, but where I used to work, this was back in 1992, and I was working in West LA at the time, living in West Hollywood. So with traffic coming home in the afternoon, sometimes it could take as long as 45 minutes to an hour to get home. Well, you may be familiar with the LA riots, the Rodney King issue. And we had an emergency curfew. It was imposed that afternoon, and everybody was rushing to get home. And I remembered looking out the window at work, and it was just bumper to bumper to bumper, so pandemonium. Everybody trying to get home before the curfew. My boss would not let us leave work early, and we're like, we need to go home, but he wouldn't let us go. But it turned out to be such a blessing, because by the time I was allowed to leave work, there was no traffic. It was like one of those movies where there's been a nuclear holocaust or something. Not a human being in sight, not a car in sight. I drove home in 8 minutes without traffic. It was such a difference. You just made me think of that. Goddess Val, I'm looking at your comment there. Yes, Amsterdam, red light district in 1973. Mom just saw a light and booked tour without understanding. Thought it was at night to see city lights. Well, in a way it was. Just not what you were expecting. Oh, let's see here. Did they ever catch the guys who beat up Rodney King? Well, it was the police officer. Oh wait. Yes, it was the police officers. Oh yes, that was the whole reason for the riots, because they were put on trial and they were acquitted, and there was just so much outrage, and that's what ignited the riots in the city. I had to think back on that. Ever see the documentary about Carol Spinney shortly before his health took a downturn? Yeah, I saw Carol Spinney on some talk shows sometimes. I remember once he was on that game show To Tell the Truth, where the three people came out and only one person was the actual person, but it was, I play Big Bird. I play Big Bird. I play Big Bird. And anyway, I can't remember if they chose the right person or not, but I remember Carol Spinney. He played Big Bird for decades. And I'm sure he was one of the lucky celebrities who had quite a bit of anonymity, because nobody knew who he was outside of that Big Bird costume. Where's some other comments here? Yeah, George Floyd, that was another story. And yeah, that was more recently, but that was also by police. Yeah. What was interesting about the Rodney King thing, this being 1992, obviously there were no, yes, I know cell phones existed, but they were very few and far between. And there certainly were not little things like this, where, you had a video recorder and camera and all that with you right in your pocket. But what made that case unique was somebody had a camcorder, back when there were those big things. If you remember in the 80s and 90s, camcorders, I used to have one myself. Somebody caught it with a camcorder, the whole thing, the police beating him. And that's what made the trial, the verdict, so outrageous. People were saying, but you've got video evidence. You can see them beating the poor man. And they still were found innocent. And so, yes, people took their anger out by setting a lot of the city on fire. Yeah, I'll never forget that. We had a curfew for 3 nights in a row where we had to be indoors by 7 p.m. But during those 3 days, I remember it was like living in an Irwin Allen disaster movie, like Earthquake or Towering Inferno or Poseidon Adventure, where you heard helicopters, you heard woo, woo, ambulances and police cars, and oh my God, it was just pandemonium. It was like everybody lost their minds. And Joyce, you remember those? Yeah. And there were a couple of malls that almost got burned down. I think the Beverly Center almost was torched. They stopped the person in time. And the mall isn't around anymore. There used to be a famous mall in the West LA called the West Side Pavilion. And somebody was caught actually walking through the mall with a can of gasoline and some newspapers. And yeah, thankfully they caught that guy also. But nonetheless, it could have been much worse. And I remember the first night was really scary because we didn't know where they were going to go. We didn't know what was going to get hit. Now, it would have made sense, areas like Beverly Hills, Bel Air, wealthy areas. And there was a lot of expectation that's where it was going to travel. And I was living in the western part of LA myself, so it was very scary. It ended up being, no, I hope I'm getting my facts straight here, but I think it was confined mainly to like the Crenshaw district of LA and a few outer parts that got badly damaged. And I remembered watching a live news coverage. It was like it was the only thing on television. It was just continuous news coverage. And there was one big mall store or something. It was just being completely raided. People had smashed in the windows and people were hauling off like washing machines and televisions and dishwashers and refrigerators. And, because the police were so overwhelmed and understaffed and underprepared, they knew nobody was going to stop them. And there were actually news helicopters flying overhead and people actually waving up to the cameras and like giving the finger and stuff like, ha ha ha, you can't do anything to us. And I think months later, they tried to use the videotape from that and tried to match up faces. And I think a few arrests got made, but a lot of people got away with that. Let's see here. Where's some other topics here? Hey, Danny. Yes, Danny, what a week and month April has been. That's usually what I talk about on Whimsy's show when we're talking about news events. But it has, I just feel for so many people, their 401ks, what's happened, their investments, and just personal security. And a lot of people are, believe me, I'm trying to keep politics off of here, but I think most of you would agree. A lot of people are just feeling very stressed and traumatized right now and overwhelmed. My phone calls for Dr. Whimsy Anderson, and because I speak to people in Florida and Texas and New York and Oregon, I mean, everywhere. Everyone I talk to is just stressed out of their minds right now. And I just hope this is going to work through. I just don't see how I can be sustained much longer. The Andy Joyce, I live in Genesso, is that correct? And yesterday there was a tornado spotted on the outskirts of town. Oh, that's scary. You didn't know about it. You were sleeping through it, but somebody on Facebook posted about it. In my little town in Virginia, we rarely got things like that. But this was after I had moved away. I can't remember if I was in college or if I was already out here in California. But my mother and father in Virginia sent me some pictures. This little cyclone tornado cut right through the yard, and we had these big trees, just cut them off like they'd been sawed down. These big tall trees, just this little tornado cutting through there, just mowed them down. And it went in a very straight line. I couldn't believe the pictures, and I saw it, and I thought, oh my God, if someone had actually been out there in the yard, that thing had come towards you, you wouldn't have survived it. What was it? Marsha Wallace said her house was only one block from the fires. Where you must be referring to the LA riots fires, because she passed away a number of years ago. I met her once. Very nice. It's a really sweet lady. Yeah, and you were lucky you were spared while you were asleep. Out of sight, out of mind, right? Yeah, Ward, I know it's entertainment, but what an exit Pope Francis made today. Just one day after rallying. Yes, I saw that. Pardon me, I should have fixed my hair before this, and it's going all over the place. I'm going to watch this show later and go, yeah, but anyway, I thought, I mean, I even wonder, was that a decision on a soul level or on a conscious level? Like, he was in very, very bad health. People who saw him knew the end was coming. But I wonder, did he know? Did he know when he went out there and did that big Easter service and greeted all those people? Because even for a person half his age, that was a very, very strenuous thing to put yourself through. I wonder if he knew that was going to be his last day on earth. Like, he was just going to give everything he had. And that was going to be like his farewell, his goodbye to the world. Like, he knew that was probably going to finish him off, because he died the following morning. But what a way to go that he got to do that. I understand he was a beautiful man, very simple man. I read before the show that he requested a very simple burial, just a plain wooden box lined with zinc. And he didn't want to be buried or I should say entombed is the correct word for it, at the Vatican, like most popes. There's this little church in Rome that he would often go visit. And he said, that's where I want to be buried. He just requested a very simple grave, simple wooden box. And I remember when he first became pope, when he was first going to, I guess, address his first big audience. Forgive me for not having the correct words for it, but usually when popes would do that, they would have that big throne chair sitting on the stage. He said, no, all I want is a simple folding chair. Just get me a simple folding chair. Now, you got to love that. And I also read, now, maybe he couldn't do this in his latter years after his health was failing him, but for a number of years when he was pope, he would disguise himself. He would just put on plain clothes, disguise himself, and he would go out at night and work in homeless shelters, ministering to people, serving food, comforting. and apparently people didn't know it was the Pope. Now I think that's amazing. I read Queen Elizabeth back in the 50s and 60s used to do that. I guess it was in the time before uh, the paparazzi got really bad, and people with their cell phones and cameras and stuff, when you could be a little more discreet. But Queen Elizabeth used to put on a wig, disguise herself, and go out to pubs and just mingle with the common folk, and she loved it, it gave her a break, you know, a much needed break from all of her responsibilities. And I think it also was good for her because she got to talk to the regular people. I mean, her subjects, but speak to them just as people without people even knowing it was the Queen. In fact, this is a tad off topic, but she was with a very good friend, and Elizabeth in private, I understand, was a practical joker. She would be a little sillier, a little looser in private, and she was with a friend. And they were just walking near Windsor Castle, and there were these American tourists. And they said, "Oh, would you take a picture of us, please?" And they handed the camera to the Queen, not knowing it's the Queen. She took their picture, and then, to make this better, they go, "We hear the Queen is around here. Do you know if she ever makes appearances?" And the Queen said, "Well, I've heard she makes appearances." And they go, "Have you ever met the Queen?" And she said, "Oh, well, yes, as a matter of fact, I have. And she was nice to me." She just played along with it. Anyway, I better get back to my comments here because we were talking about Pope Francis. Let's see. Yes, he was a beautiful soul. Yes, he is having a foreign burial from his domain. Yeah, from I think Argentina. In fact, I saw a picture online earlier. It was a picture of him from 1998, and he was on a bus in Argentina. And this was when he was just just a priest, and there he was mingling with all the other people, and all these other people going, just having no idea this man was going to be the Pope one day. But he was very much of the people. Yes, and Billy Graham was a great person too. Yeah, Billy Graham, I like. His son. Oh, I don't want to get into it here, but I find his son a little hypocritical. But Billy Graham, I think, was a good man. I was surprised that Queen Elizabeth, getting back to her, had a friendship with Billy Graham. If you ever saw the television series The Crown, they depicted on one of the episodes. And you were saying the Comedy Central roast couldn't hold a torch to the Dean Martin roast. Well, one thing I will say, the Dean Martin roasts were a lot classier. Yes, they would get a little bawdy. Sometimes they got into some like when Sammy Davis Jr. was on, they would make some jokes that today would be considered quite racist. But for the most part, it was classy. The Comedy Central roasts, those are really, really vulgar. I mean, I don't have a problem necessarily. I'm not a prude with vulgarity, but what I don't like is when it takes the place of cleverness. When people say the F word 200 times, as opposed to actually writing and constructing a joke, a clever joke, and you had a lot more cleverness on those Dean Martin roasts. They had to. It was network TV. It was the 70s. You couldn't get away with the stuff you can do on cable TV now. But I just find them unnecessarily vulgar and crude and lacking in cleverness. The one thing I did like about one of those Comedy Central roasts, it's a really good documentary about Martha Stewart that's on Netflix right now. And I remember when she appeared on the Comedy Central roast, it was the one for Justin Bieber. But they were putting it into context because she had really seen damage to her reputation, to her brand, because of spending time in prison and so forth. It hurt her financially. Her empire was falling apart. And she really didn't have too much to lose by appearing on the Comedy Central roast for Justin Bieber. And this was when Justin Bieber was in a lot of trouble. I've met him a few times. He's actually a sweet kid. Sweet kid. Well, you can't call him a kid now. He's in his early 30s now, but this is years ago. But I think he was about 21, and he was facing a prison sentence for some of his activities. And Martha Stewart came on saying, Justin, trust me, you wouldn't last 5 minutes in prison. Let me teach you what you need to know. And she was talking about things like how to make a knife from a tin can lid and how to fight off the security wardens. I mean, it was just so out of character for Martha Stewart. And it was so hysterically funny that she ended up stealing the show. And they said on the Netflix documentary that appearance completely revitalized her whole career, her whole image, brought a whole new audience to her because she was willing to make fun of herself. You know, she had a bad situation, so she just made jokes about it, and it worked. Let's see, where's some other comments here. Oh yeah, Wink Martindale. Yeah, he died at 91. I didn't know a whole lot about him, but he did many game shows. I think he also had a brief singing career in the 50s or 60s. I could be wrong on there. He had at least one song. He might have been one of those one-hit wonders type of things. Oh, yes, Ward. That's another version of this. I think there are several versions of people meeting the Queen, particularly American tourists, and not knowing it, and the Queen playing along with it. But yeah, you were telling the story there about meeting a U.S. tourist in Scotland. Yes, I must have been that. I bet that was near Balmoral because she used to go there a lot. That was like, the woman had different castles that she traveled to, and I think Balmoral was like her vacation castle or something, or at least in the summertime. But there was that story about the tourists asking if she'd ever seen the Queen, and she said she hadn't, but her guards had seen her all the time. I love that about her. Yeah. No, I heard she had a wicked sense of humor in private. Oh, and I also read that Queen Elizabeth was a gifted mimic. She would often impersonate people like world leaders, people she'd encountered, but never publicly, of course, just behind their backs in private, like Margaret Thatcher, who I understand she did not care for. I understand the Queen could mimic her quite well. Let's see, what was this? Was Queen Elizabeth I, was she known as the Queen Mother? Oh, wait, well, her mother was also named Elizabeth. And, well, actually, Queen Elizabeth was Queen Elizabeth II. Queen Elizabeth I was from the 1600s, the Virgin Queen, Queen Elizabeth. But Queen Elizabeth II's mother was Queen Elizabeth. She was the Queen consort when her husband's brother abdicated the throne, and then he was thrust into the monarchy, and hence why it passed down to Elizabeth. If you've ever seen The King's Speech, marvelous movie, won the Best Picture Oscar. Colin Firth got the Best Actor Oscar for it. Splendid film. They go into all of that. Let's see, where's some other comments here. Sorry, this thing here, sometimes I'm scrolling, it moves on me, and then I have to find my place again. That's annoying. So I lost my comment here. Okay, Danny J. North had been working as a prison cop in Florida before his 2020 retirement, I believe before COVID-19 hit. Yeah, I had heard that. That's the fate of a lot of ex-child stars. What happens? That a lot of them talk about how they were not properly educated. There's this law where you have to have a tutor on the set for 3 hours a day, and you're supposed to get proper schooling. Some claim they did, There were a lot of others, like I believe Jay North, who said it was worthless. He didn't learn a thing. He basically didn't get an education. They expected him to act like an adult and work unreasonable hours, like 14 hours a day. He'd get one day off, and he said even that one day off, he had to spend that getting his hair bleached, to play Dennis the Menace, the blonde hair. And then he said it would always burn his scalp, and he'd be in a lot of pain. But that's why a lot of those child stars ended up doing jobs like that, like being security guards and that type of thing. They weren't prepared for life. They weren't really given childhoods, the chances to learn the things, the values that most of us have instilled into us. I think that's, like I was telling that story about Lauren Chapin from Father Knows Best, how all of her money was put into a trust fund that she'd earned on the show. And when she was 18 years old, she went and cashed it all out and took a bunch of friends and a convertible out to Vegas and went through the whole fortune in one weekend. Lost everything. It's a real tragedy. We talked about that before. Let's see, where's some other questions here. Yes, that's true. Elizabeth I had no offspring. And the Queen Mother was George the Sixth's widow, but she was never. Yeah, she was a queen consort. Well, I think it was George V, wasn't it? But anyway, who was King Charles's grandmother then? Well, King Charles's grandmother would have been Queen Consort Elizabeth. That would have been his grandmother. And I'm not sure about Prince Philip's mother. I know this too. I know they even depicted this on The Crown. I believe she was from Greece, and I forget when she died. But I know the royal family took care of her for a while. Let's see. Oh, Denny, you've been binge watching an HBO network sitcom, Dream On. Oh, that show is, I think, close to 30 years ago. I think that was way back in the 90s. I remember that show. Early to mid 90s, I think, but it was well done. In fact, I'd like to see that again. Let's see what cable channel or streaming channel is showing that, or maybe that's even on HBO Max, which I don't have. I used to have that. I used to have a lot of streaming channels, especially during the pandemic. Because my justification was, well, we can't go out and do anything. We're homebound, so I might as well have all these streaming channels. So I spent a lot of money on those, and I kept them much longer than I should have. And then I finally realized I had to let a lot of them go. And truthfully, even the ones I do have, I don't watch that much, especially when I'm doing my artwork, because I can't watch television and do that. So I end up listening to audiobooks or podcasts, or I'm very selective in what I do watch. Yeah, Ward, you were talking about Martha Stewart and her sense of humor. Yeah, it's like that was an untapped part of herself. She was always so straight-laced and together, and and it worked for her for a long time, but I think it finally reached the point where it was working against her, especially because it was so contradictory to having spent 5 months in prison. And now, granted, I think it was unfair what happened, why she was put in prison in the first place, but nonetheless, she did serve, and it did hurt her image. It hurt her brand, and I don't think people were buying that old image anymore. So she just turned it on its ear, went on Comedy Central, and went for Martha Stewart 2.0 and made herself a comedian. Why am I even thinking of Leslie Nielsen, the actor? He had this very straight-laced career for many, many years, and then he did the airplane movie, the comedy, and then the brothers who did that movie started putting him in more comedies. Leslie Nielsen had probably the biggest renaissance of his whole career as a comedic actor for the same reason. Let's see here. Yeah, that's true. Martha Stewart had she was under house arrest for a long time. In fact, she told the story not too long ago. Oh, I saw it somewhere where she was asked if she would ever host Saturday Night Live, and she said yes, she wanted to, and she was asked to do so, and she wasn't allowed to do it because of her parole. Her parole officer would not let her do it. And I think it also had to do with her house arrest or something, and so big opportunity was missed out there. Danny, you were saying I have the first 2 seasons of Dream On DVD. Yeah, as I recall, it was released on DVD a long time ago. It's probably out of print now, but that's why I was even surprised that it would be streaming anywhere because it's such an old series. But it was good. I remember that. It was I think it was an actor named Brian Benben. Is that correct? Um, yeah, but it was clever. Wow. Let's see. Let me see. Elizabeth married to Mad. Let's see. Was Elizabeth married to Mad King George? No, no. Well, not in real life, but there is some irony there because Helen Mirren played his wife, and Helen Mirren, of course, won an Oscar for playing Queen Elizabeth in another movie. So that's kind of like, well, yes and no, but no, not really. Uh, That's a movie I still want to see, The Madness of King George. That movie, not so surprisingly, has been coming up for discussion a lot lately because of current events. Leave it at that. But I would like to see the movie. And I know that I think it was Nigel Hawthorne. I think that's who starred in it. And I remember he was up for a Best Actor Oscar for it. I understand his performance is quite brilliant. And Helen Mirren, I think, was up for supporting actress for it. Let's see. Here, where's some other comments here? Disney having produced Hello Ladies under its ABC, which is Disney owns the off HBO rights to one of HBO's most recent network shows, short-lived 2013 sitcom Hello Ladies. Now that's one I've never heard of, and I know that there are a lot of pilots that are shot for HBO that never see the light of the day, and I know that because I was in one once. I've told that back in 1999. It was just tiny little parts, nothing worth noting, but it had Jonathan Silverman and let's see, Gary Cole was in it, and Ed Begley Jr. I had to think who was in that. All nice guys, and I worked on that show for about 5 days. We did it at the Warner Brothers Ranch, which is at the time was a few blocks from the main Warner Brothers studio, and that's I talked about that. That's where a lot of the Screen Gem shows were shot back in the 60s, like I Dream of Jeannie, Bewitched, Hazel, The Partridge Family was done there. And at the time I did that HBO pilot, on my lunch break, I took a walk around the ranch, not quite knowing the history of it, but I immediately recognized, oh my God, that's the house from Bewitched. I saw the Bewitched house. I saw the house used in I Dream of Jeannie, and I recognize. Anyway, it's all gone now. They've torn it down. No regard for history in this city, unfortunately. And there were even people, those houses, of course, were facades. The interiors were done on sound stages, but the facades were used for external. And there were people, just petitions and people begging, please don't tear these things down. It's entertainment history. And there were people offering to buy the facades and pay to have them moved to another location. And Warner Brothers wouldn't do it. And it was just such a shame to see the wrecking ball tearing those things down. But that's what goes on. And I found out not too long ago that the Waltons house, the exterior on Warner Brothers, that had been torn down many years ago. And because I was on the Warner Brothers lot as recently as 2 years ago, and I recognized like a lot of the wooded area and stuff that you would see on the Waltons and on. I thought, well, the house has got to be here somewhere. And I looked around, I couldn't find it. And well, no wonder I couldn't find it. It doesn't exist anymore. And And in fact, speaking of the Waltons, I've been rediscovering that show. When I do have time to watch TV, they have all the seasons on Amazon Prime. And I told on here how I've told this many times. I knew Ellen Corby, who played Grandma Walton, and that was very special to me because I grew up with that show, and so it was special to get to know her and talk with her. And I saw that there's going to be these Hollywood shows where they do these autograph events in early June in Burbank at the airport Marriott ballroom. They're going to have one, and they're going to have the entire surviving cast of the Waltons, including Richard Thomas and Michael Learned and all the kids. And I think I'm going to go to that. I figure I've met Ellen Corby, might as well complete my set, meet the rest of the Waltons. Plus, I love the show so much. I always recommend that show because the writing and the acting was magnificent. It won so many Emmys for acting and writing, and one year it got the Emmy Best Drama Series. Anyway, check it out if you ever feel like it. Where's some other comments here? But the original Mad Men pilot was made for HBO, but was passed over. Yeah, I'm sure they had some regrets about that. And I'm sorry that HBO didn't get Mad Men, because it ended up being bought by AMC, the AMC channel, which is much smaller budget for their shows there. And I read that was a problem for Mad Men. If you see the pilot, it's extremely lavish. I understand it cost over $3 million to make that pilot, and it was done with lush cinematography and lighting and beautiful costumes and sets, recreating 1960. And they were able to keep the values up for a while on the show, but I read that the actors on there made very little money. There was not much money to be made on there. I think it was John Hamm, or it was the woman who played Betty Draper. She said, everybody thinks that we're all rich because of the show. Trust me, we're not. AMC doesn't pay that much money. But what I noticed with Mad Men, after about the third or fourth year, you could really see the budget cuts on there. The show started to get really cheap looking. Like you could tell by locations. There was not the rich diversity of locations because it was obviously a period piece show, and the costumes weren't quite so sumptuous. And I noticed that they were reusing a lot of the same sets over and over, anything to economize. And also the cinematography, it started to get more of a flat television, it started to look like a regular television show instead of a movie. And I think if HBO had that show, they would have had the big bucks to have kept up the production values on it. So I'm sorry that didn't happen. Let's see. Yeah, the Stooges didn't live to host SNL. No, I think that was way, way past their time. Even though SNL began in 1975, I think at least two were still living, but they were I think it was, I can't remember if it was Mo or Larry who was living in the motion picture retirement home at the time in Woodland Hills. No, someone who did host Saturday Night Live in that first year, though, was Desi Arnaz. Now, that was a lot of fun to see Ricky Ricardo. To have Gilda Radner playing Lucy with the real Ricky Ricardo. To me, that show is just precious. I'm so glad that happened. Yeah, AMC picked it up, and the rest is history, as I was saying. What was it, Sandy? The Columbia Pictures lot's still there, or is it torn down? Well, look, for a time, Columbia Pictures owned the Warner Brothers lot. It actually bore, the famous water tower tank they have there with the Warner Brothers logo. It actually said Columbia Pictures for a number of years, and then it went back to Warner Brothers again. Columbia Pictures is now in Culver City, and they own the old MGM lot That's now Columbia Pictures. And of course, the original Columbia Pictures, going back to the 1930s, that's when they used to call it a Poverty Row studio. It was a very low budget studio, and anyway, a lot of actors did not want to work there because they didn't want the taint of a low budget studio. And that was on Gower Street in Hollywood, and those sound stages are still there. They're still there, and I don't know who owns them now. Sorry about that. I tell people not to call me during the show, but they do it anyway. So I have to keep declining. But that, you may know the story of it. It happened one night. The film with Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert, big classic comedy, won the Best Picture Oscar. Gable got Best Actor. Colbert got Best Actress. Frank Capra got Best Director, won for its screenplay. But anyway, that was just a lark. It was made at Columbia Pictures. It was the first big movie they ever had. And Clark Gable was sent there to punish him. He was at MGM, and he was getting a little too full of himself, a little arrogant, and he was demanding more money. So Louis B. Mayer thought, well, I'm going to put Gable in line. I'm going to loan him out to Columbia Pictures, this Poverty Row studio. And of course, Gable was horrified by it and all, but he had no choice. He had to do what he was ordered to do. And Frank Capra wrote about it in his autobiography, how Gable was not happy about this, and he made his feelings known. And Colbert, I forget the reason she did it, because she was at Paramount, but she was on vacation, and I guess she wanted to make a little extra money or something, but neither of them thought this was going to be anything other than a little grade B, low budget film. And then it just ended up going out into the world and becoming a major hit, and actually made them much bigger stars as a result. And that little film is what put Columbia Pictures on the map. And then from that point on, Columbia started to be taken seriously as a major studio. And I used to be very good friends with Evelyn Keyes, the actress, she wasn't a superstar, but she was a pretty big star in the 1940s. And she was at Columbia, and she used to tell me stories about Harry Cohn, the president of Columbia. Everybody hated him. He was considered a real son of a bitch. And she said, you know what? I adored him. I got along with him just fine. She told stories about how she would go to his house for dinner, and it was like the stereotype of the movie mogul at the head of the table with 4 telephones in front of him. That really was Harry Cohn. He had 4 telephones in front of him, and he used to love to invite writers over, and they would all sit around this big dinner table and just bounce ideas around, talking. And Harry Cohn loved it, because that's where a lot of his ideas for movies came from, just his writers bouncing ideas off while they were drinking and eating. And Evelyn always loved writing. That's what she became after her acting days ended. She became a writer, and she said she was just in heaven sitting there at that table with all those writers and Harry Cohn. Now, she did say Harry Cohn also kind of destroyed her career. So I was amazed she spoke so fondly of him. He fell in love with her, and he wanted to marry her. And she turned down his proposal. And he said, I will personally see to it that you never become a bigger star than you are right now. And so a lot of big projects came along that she never got to do. I don't know if you know the movie Born Yesterday with Judy Holliday. She got the Best Actress Oscar for it. Great role. When I got the DVD for that, I looked at the back of it, and it was saying that there were other actresses being considered for the role that eventually Judy Holliday got. And they listed among those actresses Lucille Ball and Evelyn Keyes. So the next time I saw Evelyn Keyes, I told her about it. And I said, you never told me you were up for Born Yesterday. And she said, because I wasn't. Where did you hear that from? And I said, well, it was on the back of the DVD box. And she said, that's not true. You got to understand, Harry Cohn was out to ruin my career. There was no way he was going to give me that role. She said, don't believe the stuff they put on the back of these things, stuff. Lots of times they get the facts wrong. But anyway, what are some other comments here? Yeah, I was answering about Columbia Pictures. Which business did Harry Cohn work for? I was just saying he was the president of Columbia Pictures. Um, Ward, you were just reiterating he wasn't the nicest person. There is a story. He was so hated that, and this is a joke that's been told many times, but I understand this is honestly the first time it was ever told, and this is where it started. It was Harry Cohn's funeral, and there was this big procession of cars and limos, and I think there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people at attendance at the funeral. And someone was talking to Red Skelton, and they said, "Wow, look at the turnout for Harry Cohn's funeral." And Red Skelton said, "Yep, see what happens when you give the public what they want." Now, that joke's been told a lot, but that's where it came from. And I mentioned that to Evelyn Keyes, and she was a little cold. She goes, "Yes, I've heard that." I could tell she didn't appreciate it because she, for the most part, she liked Harry Cohn, and she didn't like him being put down. Let's see here. Not the nicest person. Well, yeah, he loved firing people. He loved doing a lot of mean things, frankly. He and Lucille Ball had a horrible falling out. See, Harry Cohn liked to screw people over. And Lucy had, and this was in the late 1940s, she had a 3-picture deal with Columbia. And it was in her contract that she would get $100,000 for the 3rd movie. And she had completed the first 2. And then it came time for her 3rd movie for Columbia. And Harry purposely sent her the most awful script, just a horrible movie. And everybody knew it. Desi knew this and said to Lucy, "He's trying to get you to break your contract so he doesn't pay you your $100,000. And Lucy said, "Yeah, I know. He sent me this piece of crap script knowing perfectly well I don't want it. And if I decline it, I forfeit my $100,000. And at the time, she had just learned she was pregnant. And there was a clause in her contract that said if she was pregnant, it would terminate her. It would just automatically null and void her contract. So she had to keep that secret for one thing. But the other thing was, Desi said, "You know what? Oh, wait, no, wait. There was more to the story here." There was a movie she did want to do. It was The Greatest Show on Earth, being directed by Cecil B. DeMille. And it was The Elephant Girl. And it's the role that later went to Betty Hutton. And the movie went on to win the Best Picture Oscar. Lucy wanted that, but she knew when she was pregnant, obviously she could not do that movie, because the months it would take to make the movie she'd be showing, she couldn't do it. So she knew that was out. And she didn't have any other prospects other than this one film for Columbia. And it was just something horrible. It was some Arabian Nights thing where she had to play a genie. I think it was called The Magic Carpet or something. I've never seen it to this day, but it was supposed to be really bad. The script just stank. And Desi read the script again. He said, "You know what, Lucy? This movie is so bad, nobody's going to see in it. It's not going to hurt your career. Tell Harry you're going to do it." And she said, "You're right. Nobody's going to see this piece of garbage." So she went back to Harry and said, "Harry, I will happily do your movie." And Harry was furious because he thought he was going to get one over on her and not have to pay her for the movie, and she was going to decline. He was horrified she wanted to make the movie because I don't think he even wanted to make the movie. He just had this really bad script sitting around that apparently he used whenever he had to put someone in line or screw them out over. He never intended to make the movie. Now he had no choice but to make the film because Lucy it was in her contract. If she accepted this, he had to do it. So he had to pay her $100,000 and to make this horrible movie. And then on the last day of filming, Oh, and by the way, when they were making the movie, there were all these harem costumes, and she had to wear these harem pants, kind of like Barbara Eden on I Dream of Jeannie. And every day, the wardrobe mistress had to keep letting the seam out. Couldn't understand why Lucy was getting bigger. And Lucy said, "Oh, it's all those meals at craft service. I guess I got to go on a diet." And she kept her pregnancy secret. Finished the movie, and then she got dressed and went to Harry Cohn's office, knocking on the door, coming in and going, "Well, congratulate me, Harry. I'm going to have a baby." And Harry, according to Lucy, Harry Cohn got red faced. He was furious. He was slamming his fist down on his desk, had his cigar in his mouth. He was practically biting it off. And I better not use the language on here, but it was like, fuck you. I mean, he was screaming every swear word he had at Lucy. You goddamn bitch, you screwed me over. I will destroy you. I will ruin your career. And Lucy said she was staying there. Tears were running down her face. It was so horrible. She was standing there shaking and crying. He was so vicious. It was so vicious. And anyway, that was that. But she got the upper hand on Harry Cohn. And he did threaten to ruin her. And I always wondered if he had a hand in J. Edgar Hoover and Walter Winchell getting that information about her communist registration. I don't know. Harry Cohn was an extremely vengeful man, and he would hold on to a grudge forever. So I don't know. I think maybe he did have a hand in trying to ruin Lucy's career. Only thankfully he did not get away with it. Windy Bird, hi, I'm glad you popped in to say hello and all your lovely emojis there. It's like all the charms on Whimsy's hat you made for her. Where's some other comments here? Let me go back here. Wait, what was this, Andy? You were asking about Long Trailer, one of them? Forgive me, I'm so sorry. I'm scrolling back here on comments here. I do know the Long Trailer was made for MGM. That was definitely not a Columbia picture. That was for MGM, and that was made between the second and third seasons of I Love Lucy during their summer break. Oh, wait, Andy, you were asking, was that when she was pregnant with Desi Jr. or her daughter, Lucy? That would have been little Lucy. That would have been little Lucy. Lucy had several miscarriages up to that point. It's quite a poignant story. Lucy at the age of 39 thought it was all over, truly over. I mean, when you were in those days, when you were about 40 years old, that was like old age for an actress, an ingenue. It was like you were ready to start playing grandmothers. I mean, that's exaggerating, but it was not a good time for an actress at that age. So she thought her career was starting to wind down. She had repeated miscarriages. She wanted so much to be a mother, and she thought that was leaving her. So she thought she was getting too old to be a mother. And then she thought her marriage to Desi was over because he was on the road all the time with his band. They hardly ever saw each other. And this is a woman, she had two sacred dreams. She wanted to be, more than anything in the world, she wanted to be a mother, and she wanted to be the biggest star in Hollywood. Literally, she wanted to be the biggest star in Hollywood, and she wanted to be a mother. And at 39, she thought that was over. Next year, like 2-3 weeks before her 40th birthday, she gave birth to her first child, little Lucy Arnaz. And then 6 weeks after that, started rehearsals for I Love Lucy. I Love Lucy shot to #1 on television at a time when the movie industry was starting to die, and a lot of her contemporary stars like Crawford and Davis and Stanwyck, they were seeing their careers go down. Lucy was literally the biggest star in Hollywood and a first-time mother at the age of 40. It was quite something, quite inspiring. Let's see, where's some other comments here. No, Ward, you were asking about Lucy. Yeah. Let's see, where's some other comments here. And my scrolling here just popped up on me. It won't stay in place. I didn't know that about Ted Healy, how he died. And of course, Ted Healy was behind the Three Stooges. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but there's a Joan Crawford, Clark Gable movie from 1933 called Dancing Lady that the Stooges appear in. And I did not know this, but Joan Crawford kept a friendship with, I think it was with Larry. It was Larry Fine. Because I've seen letters between them, correspondence in the 60s and 70s and letters from Joan Crawford. And you could tell from the letters, she thought of him as a beloved old friend. She adored him. So it must have dated back to when they were making that movie together. Danny, have you ever been to Hollywood Center Studios where I Love Lucy filmed its first 2 seasons? Oh, you bet your life I have. I've told those stories many times on here. You probably haven't heard it, but yeah, first time I was ever there, because it's generally closed to the public. Very hard to get on there, but it was back in 2001. It was September 8th, 2001. And the reason I know that was because it was the 50th anniversary of when I Love Lucy started production, started rehearsals. And they had a plaque dedication ceremony on stage 2, which is where I Love Lucy was done. And I was there for the dedication. There were a number of people who worked on the show, like Dan Kahn, who was the editor of the show. I can't remember who else was there, but I think Lucille Arnaz was there. But it was a nice ceremony. And I very much wanted to go on the soundstage, and they wouldn't let me. They wouldn't let anybody on there. And I even went to the security guard. And I asked, as nicely as I could, I said, "Please, sir, could I just stick my head in the door? No. Please, it would mean so much. You don't know how much I have loved the show since I was 2 years old. I have dreamt of being on the soundstage. Please, just 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Could I just step in the door?" No. They wouldn't let me on. And I wasn't asking much. I was asking basically to stick my head in the door, just take a look. They wouldn't let me. And I did a bad thing. It was not successful, but I saw some people coming out and the door was swung open and I ran to that door trying to get in there before it slammed shut. And I knew they were going to throw me off, but I didn't care. I really didn't care. I just wanted to get on that soundstage. So anyway, I was not successful. But flash forward to the night of October 15th, 2001. That was the night of the 50th anniversary of the broadcast of the first episode of I Love Lucy. And there was a great big party, celebration, red carpet and all that. And because of my connection with Bart Andrews, we worked together on a book and he was the author of the original I Love Lucy book. He was invited and he brought me as his guest. So a few weeks earlier, I was having the door literally slammed in my face. Now I was walking the red carpet right up to the soundstage where they had the party on the actual soundstage. Desi Arnaz Jr. was there, and I remember Isabel Sanford, Rosemary, I think Dick Van Dyke was there. It was covered by the press. It was a big, big event. It was originally supposed to be black tie, which I could have done. I had a tuxedo at the time. I still have that tuxedo. It just doesn't fit anymore. And it's out of style, but I did at the time. But that was right after September 11th. And if you remember the circumstances in those days, it was not a time to be doing celebrations, parties, award shows, that type of thing. A lot of stuff got canceled. Or if they did have it, they had to make it much lower key. So even though it was red carpet, we just wore like regular suits and things. It was a little more somber. But I was thrilled to be there. I was thrilled to be on that soundstage. And at 9 p.m. to the second, a big 100-inch screen came down, lower down, and to the second they played the I Love Lucy first episode with all the commercials, opening credits, exactly as they had played 50 years earlier. And I was sitting there at a table with a lot of the people who had worked on the show and who had all gathered together, because I talked to Emily Daniels, the widow of Mark Daniels, the director of the show. She said the whole cast, the crew, they all gathered at their house in Laurel Canyon, and they all gathered around a little 12-inch black and white TV set, and they made spaghetti, and people were sitting on the floor. Lucy, Desi, everybody, they were sitting on the floor with their spaghetti, watching it on that little 12-inch black and white TV. So here I was with a lot of those people who were there that night 50 years later, only now we were watching it on a 100-inch screen and on the soundstage. So anyway, to answer your question, a big yes, I have been there, and in a big way. When I was there that night, I thought, someone had given me a choice. You can either go to this event, or we're going to give you first class tickets to Paris to stay in a 5-star hotel, all expenses paid. I still would have taken that night on the I Love Lucy soundstage. I was a kid in a candy store. It meant the world to me. Let's see here. Now, Andy, I've never been to Graceland. My sister's been there. Maybe I'll do that one day. I've only been to Memphis once, and that was when I drove through there when I was moving out to California. But I would like to see Graceland someday. Ward, I've heard that about Larry Fine. I can say this, having met a lot of these old stars and a lot of the old TV stars and so forth. It's rare I would ever encounter one who wasn't nice, who wouldn't take time and sit with you and answer questions, because they enjoyed it. They missed their glory days. It was great when a fan appreciated them. I think the only one, I've said this on here, I think the only one I can think of who didn't want to do that was Tina Louise. I've told this before enough times on the show. When I met her, I spent an hour with her once. I put together a nutrition program, and Tina Louise was nice. I don't want to impugn her in any way. Very nice, but very brusque, businesslike. This was a woman you did not do small talk with. She was not into small talk, and I got the definite vibe from her: do not even think about bringing up either of the G words, Gilligan or Ginger. She just, everything I'd ever read about her, she did not want to talk about that. She blamed it for typecasting her, ruining her dramatic career, and she did pretty much everything she could to kind of bury that. Though in latter years now, I understand she will be more gracious with fans. She will sign autographs. She'll talk a little bit, but it's not one of her favorite topics by any means. But anyway, most are very nice about it. Like, it was particularly, I told the story of Natalie Schaefer, played Mrs. Howell. She spent a half hour with me just answering all my questions, and she couldn't have been more delightful. Dawn Wells was very nice to me too. Yes, I've met all the women at Gilligan's Island. Can check that off my bucket list. Yeah, Andy, it's a shame you didn't get to meet any of the Three Stooges. I think they really would have loved you, because you're such a devoted fan. They would have appreciated that. I know that. And Wendy, about your emojis: peace, love, happiness, freedom, the promise of tomorrow, sun, moon, stars, the ever-expanding universe and our place in it. I like that, Wendy, very much. Very much. And by the way, Wendy, I'm sure you know this, our dear Whimsy is going to Israel tomorrow. Say your prayers for her, that she's safe and she accomplishes what she wants to do on this trip. But yeah, those are lovely. I like them very much. They're like magic charms. What do you like to put in spaghetti? Meat sauce. I just put in hamburger, sausage, taco meat, meatballs, and a little garlic. Yeah. Oh, got me hungry here. I keep saying someday I'm going to make a big pot of real spaghetti sauce and pasta. I've been craving it. I miss it. I'm just lazy in the kitchen. That's my thing. Some people love it. It's their creativity. It's their way of expressing themselves. For me, it's my art. It's my writing. And I love good cooking, but I love it mostly when it's prepared and put in front of me. I'm bad about that. Yeah. Of course, you wanted to meet Priscilla and Lisa Marie. And of course, Lisa Marie is buried there now, buried there with her father. And I would imagine Priscilla will be buried there one day too. Um, and if she doesn't want to talk about Ginger, she'll talk about scenes with the professor. No, I got the vibe. She did not want to talk about any aspect of that show. Any. No, I didn't ask her about her Broadway show with Carol Burnett and Jack Cassidy, but you know what? I have a feeling she would have been more happy to have talked about that than Gilligan's Island. I think so. Anything that was outside of that, because she always wanted to be taken seriously as a dramatic actress, and of course, that was a Broadway musical she was in, and I don't think she ever did another one after that. But yeah, I would have been curious to have asked her about it, especially because I love Carol Burnett so much. Danny, do I ever watch a religious programming? No, I never watch those shows. No, I know what you're talking about, and I don't want to impugn those shows for anybody who takes them seriously or they have meaning for, but I that's just not my thing. Yeah, I knew Kirk Cameron had been doing some preaching now. Yeah, I know that. Yeah. Wendy Burt, you're so worried about Whimsy. Well, I tell you what, Wendy, don't worry about Whimsy. When Whimsy went to Israel about a year and a half ago, it was not long after the war had broken out. I will admit, I was scared to death for her. A lot of her friends were. And I was among the friends who was saying to Whimsy, are you sure you want to do this? But Whimsy is extremely intuitive. As you know, she's a gifted intuitive. And Whimsy just said to me, don't worry, I'm fine. I'm going to be okay. Don't worry about me. And that's basically what she's saying right now. Last I talked to her, she's very happy. She's very at peace about this. She knows she'll be okay. She said if she felt she wasn't, she has enough sense. She would have canceled or postponed the trip. So she knows it's all right, Wendy. But just the same, let's all pray for her and that she accomplishes what she hopes to do, and that's a good time. And, and also pray that she's healthy and strong on this trip, because sometimes she has gotten sick on trips. And so pray for her good health, her strength, her stamina. And she'll be fine. She'll be back in 2 or 3 weeks. What's this, Andy? I got a name for you, Chuck. Michael Dunn and the character Lovelace. I'm not familiar with. I'm not familiar with that. Maybe you can fill me in a little more on that. Yeah, exactly. Hope, pray for Whimsy until her return, but don't have fear for her. She's quite certain she's going to be fine, and I'm going to trust in that myself. And Wendy, yes, her Project Oasis is really, really important to her. I wasn't going to mention it so much here because I feel like that's for her to discuss. But you know of it, and anybody else here who watches Whimsy's show, yes, yeah, pray for that for her, because it's something that will do a lot of good for a lot of people, and I think it will be Whimsy's legacy. She spent a lot of years working on this, and she's going to have some meetings when she's there. And I think she's going to have meetings in Jerusalem, and let's pray the meetings go well. The people see her, they take her seriously, really listen to her. This happens. She deserves this. Whimsy is, let me tell you, I can't speak more highly for Whimsy. She has done so much good for me personally. The reason I'm doing this show right here is because of Whimsy. It's because it's an offshoot of doing the show with her, and I've told how she was asking me to be on it with her, and I was going, Whimsy, I can't do a live show. I can't do this. She's like, yes, you can. Yes, you can. Come on. And I went on her show, and I made a ton of mistakes. I had lighting issues, sound issues, internet issues, you name it. And God bless that woman. She was patient with me. And she encouraged me to do things like this. And I've told how Whimsy personally trained me to be a naturopathic doctor's assistant, get my license. That woman personally had me at her home, cooked dinners, and then we get out the medical books. I mean, I owe so much to her. She's been so good to me, and yeah, and she's the real deal. You know, like I work as her assistant. I make calls to her people, and yes, I praise her to the ceiling and beyond, to the sky, because all I do is tell the truth and mean what I say. I better get back to some comments here. Which would have loved to done take a tour where Jesus walked, and other stuff with the Bible, and the tour guide was Charlton Heston. Well, you know what? Well, we certainly can't get Charlton Heston anymore, not unless you have a seance or something. But yeah, you can take tours like that. It's my understanding. You can go to the Holy Land. You can take tours where Jesus walked, and I think that would be quite profound and powerful. The TV shows The Wild Wild West. Okay, I have vague awareness of Wild Wild West, but I haven't really watched it in many, many years. That's why the names weren't registering with me. Now, I know Agnes Moorehead guest starred on that show and won an Emmy for it. It's the only Emmy she ever won in her career. She was nominated many times for Endora, but that's what she got her Emmy for. And I'd love to watch that. Maybe it's on YouTube. And of course, Agnes Moorehead was a splendid actress anyway. Or Andy, I'd also like to see Jerusalem. Yes, the River Jordan, the Dead Sea. Yeah, I would too. I haven't traveled in a long time. I need to get back out into the world. I let my passport expire during the lockdown, and I've told this story about how I had a big birthday that summer, and my plan was to go back to Venice. I had been there many years earlier. It's one of my favorite cities in the world. And of course, I ended up spending it sitting here on this very couch in this very room, talking to people on the phone on my birthday. Nobody was traveling anywhere during the lockdown. And I let my passport expire, and I need to get that renewed, and I need to get back out into the world, literally, figuratively, literally out into the world again, because I live for travel. I love it. I think it's one of the most, and Joyce, you know this, you're one of the most well-traveled people I know. Travel just enriches your soul. It stays with you. You're never the same. And for the most part, you're much better for having traveled and experiencing other cultures and other ways of living. And for me, like studying art history in college, to go to the Louvre the first time and see these beloved pieces that I had only known from pictures in my textbook, and recognizing them and running excitedly to them like a little kid. But yeah, Charlton Heston giving a tour of the Holy Land, that would be something. Or say, I prefer Mark Twain guiding me there. He actually did tour that area in the late 19th century. That's fascinating, of course, and that was the era where that type of travel was very, very rare for Americans. When you actually had to get on a ship and cross the oceans, and that was something that wasn't available to a lot of people. Mark Twain was the Groucho of the 19th century, very razor sharp, witty. Yes, that is true. I've been exploring a lot of 19th century writers lately. Like I went to, there's a lot of works from Tolstoy that I have never gotten around to reading that I want to do. And the great thing about a lot of the 19th century writers, their works are in the public domain, meaning like if you have like iBooks or Kindle, a lot of those things you can get for free. Or if you want actual physical books, you can get them very inexpensively, because when something's in public domain, no royalties to pay, just publishing costs. Um, yeah, I've heard that the Garden of Eden might have been in Iraq. Joyce, yes, I love Italy too. I've been trying to learn the language, and I have not been doing well on my own. I realize I need to have someone either to speak the language with, or there are these apps like artificial intelligence where you can have somebody speaking the language with you. I think that's the only way I'm going to master the language, is to actually converse, use it in practical and also on a daily basis. The teachers I've worked with said the secret is repetition. You got to be with it daily. And I've been terrible about that. I'd be very embarrassing when asked me to say something in Italian right now. But yes, Joyce, I want to go there. It's probably the first place I will travel to when I can afford it and I have the passport. Anyone here been to Iceland? No, I've flown over it, but I've never been to it. I have a friend who went there. It was with Goddess Vow. My passport expired last year, and I only realized last month. Hard to know how to renew. I can't decide if it's safe by U.S. mail or to go in person to my local courthouse. In this current environment, you know what I mean? And with all of the staffs being fired from agencies, I'm wondering what the best way to go about getting a passport is. I know, like, you can go to the post office, do it that way. I see things online like Facebook saying that if you have a passport, even if it's expired, if it's within the last 10 years, you can use that as the basis to renew your passport, and you just pay your fee. Otherwise, you have to produce a birth certificate, which I've got somewhere. I asked, could it be a copy? And then, no, it has to be an actual notarized birth certificate. So somewhere I've got to find my old passport. I think I've got it in a box in a closet here somewhere. So you know how we put things away for safekeeping, and then it's a little too safe because we forget where it is. That's kind of my case with my passport, but I'm sure I can find it easily enough. Joyce, first time I went to Rome, I felt like I've been there before. Well, I'm a big believer in past lives, and that's the way I felt in Venice. And that's the way I also felt when I was in Barcelona. Like, I definitely had been there before, and maybe several times before. Yeah. Oh, Andy, you're Facebook friends with the guy who played Johnny Whitaker. I've met him. He doesn't look like little Jody anymore. He's in his 60s now, and he's aged. He's aged in a normal way, but he's a nice guy. Oh yeah, ask him about Sigmund and the Sea Monsters. I remember that show. Have I heard about the Hollywood Center Motel? It sounds a little familiar, but I can't quite place it. Maybe you can tell me more or tip me off a little. Well, you ate a reindeer hot dog, Andy. Wow. You have to tell me what that tasted like. I know that well, no, wait. I bet it'd be venison, it'd be deer meat. And the one time I had venison, I thought it was repugnant. I hated the taste. It just was not for me. A reindeer hot dog or a kangaroo hamburger in Australia. Well, I guess do it at least once. Let's see here. Goddess Vow, I'm wondering if they still have an office in houses also. I'd say the thing to do would be just to Google it. Like, what do I need to do to get a passport? What are the steps? I'm sure it's all on there. I understand there are a lot of people who have been trying to get their passports now. People can't imagine why, feeling they need to leave the country, but they are. Sorry, I really try to avoid the politics here. I do because last fall I did it and I had some really, really mean comments that had to be filtered out, thankfully from one of my kind administrators, but it was hurtful, and that's the double-edged sword of doing shows like this. Sometimes you guys are wonderful, but occasionally there will be someone who'll come on and it's not so nice. That just comes with the territory. Venison chili is fantastic. Really? Well, maybe I'd try that. Maybe with all the other spices and everything, that fixes it up a little bit. I can't remember. It was when I was a kid, where I was from, a lot of people went hunting, deer hunting. And I remember my parents were given some venison and I think I had one bite and that was enough for me. If it was a kangaroo hot dog, I would say it would have a kick to it. Yeah. I guess that would be interesting. So many things I haven't tried. I've never had rattlesnake meat. Here it tastes like chicken, but I've never had it. Chocolate covered grasshoppers. I've never had those. I've known people to do that. But I don't know. Joyce, I bet you've had some unusual dishes in all your travels. And frog hot dog, you'd hop to it. Yeah. Well, you can always have frog legs, which I've never had that. Never had that. You got me thinking. I should make a list of foods I've never tried, like a bucket list, and make a point of trying each one at least once, and then probably never again. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure where you were saying venison is rich and hearty, but not fatty. I'm sure it is healthy. I'd imagine it's very lean, but the taste turned me off. But anyway, Ward, good night. Thank you for joining. In fact, oh my God, I've been on here too long myself. I just looked at the time. It's 7:00 my time. Actually, I need to be going too because I have what was it? I don't want snails. I've never had snails either, and I don't know if I want those either. I don't know. I'd be like Lucy with the snail clip on my nose. But anyway, I didn't realize how long we'd been on here talking. It's 7:00. I've been on here close to 2 hours. Time flies when we have fun. So I just want to thank you all for joining. Unless you've got a closing comment or something, I think I'm going to sign off because I've got to meet with a friend. Oh, it's 9:00 where you are. Well, Andy, thank you for joining. I really appreciate that. I appreciate every single one of you for joining and supporting this for me. Because there wouldn't be a show without you guys, because I come on here and I just bounce off of the topics you give me and the questions. I appreciate it very much. What was it, Joyce? It can taste gamey if not treated correctly. I guess that's a good word for it, gamey. I kind of remember that smell also. I don't know if you're talking about venison or snails, but I would imagine either one would taste kind of gamey. Snails delicious on Disney cruise ships. Well, I know snails are considered a delicacy. Andy, no, I didn't get your message on Facebook. I'm so sorry. I don't know how you sent it. Maybe try again. I apologize for that. I didn't receive it. But please send it again. And thank you for all the hearts you guys are sending. Bear is terribly gamey. I've never had bear. Ooh. So it's starting to sound like the wild, wild west here now. Bear and rattlesnake and Joyce, you'll have to tell me where you had bear. Maybe if it's prepared properly. But snails are supposed to be a delicacy, and I suppose I should try those at the very least. You've tasted snails, not your favorite. Well, maybe I'll go by your warning there. What's it? What was this, Andy? Speaking of cruises, I would have loved to have gone on an Abbott Costello cruise sponsored by Lou's daughter. That would have been fun to do something like that. Yeah. I have always wanted to take a cruise across the Atlantic to Europe. To have a feel of what it was once like. To I've gone numerous times by plane, but to have a real feel for the distance, to actually cross the ocean. I wish I could do that someday. I don't know if many cruises like that are available, and I'm sure they're very expensive if they are. Um, you'd never eat octopus? Well, you know what? You're right. I'm thinking of calamari, which I have to admit I love, but you're right, Joyce. They're extremely intelligent. Did you see that documentary on Netflix, My Octopus Teacher? I think I have the right title. You probably have, since they're very smart animals. If you haven't, you will adore this documentary. It even won the Oscar for outstanding documentary feature. Um, oh my God, it's so sad. At the end, well, you can guess what happens to the octopus at the end, but I will say this: the octopus lives a natural lifespan, so nothing bad happens. It's just the circle of life, nature, and the man in the documentary got very close with this octopus, and the octopus recognized him whenever he'd be there underwater. And dolphins are very intelligent, also very smart. I have never hugged a dolphin, but I've patted a dolphin's head before. Oh, Joyce, calamari is squid. Okay, yeah, octopus is not calamari. Squid is calamari. Okay, but I was thinking it was in that same family. That's why I was thinking it was squid and octopus. But yeah, you're right. Octopus is incredible intelligence. Yeah, it does feel a bit like a rubber suit with a dolphin. I think that it was nothing exotic or anything. I think it was when SeaWorld used to be around. That's when I got to pet a dolphin. Unfortunately, a dolphin in captivity. I know that's wrong. It's wrong. And of course, I have seen them out in the ocean on boats. And that's spectacular to watch them diving, jumping in the air, enjoying diving. No, so I've done that. I've done that when I've gone whale watching too at San Pedro. But anyway, I've been on here about 2 hours now, so I think I am going to sign out now because I've got to tend to some other activities and I've got some dinner plans. But thank you very, very much for being here. I won't be doing Whimsy Show for the next 2 weeks for obvious reasons. But I thank you when you do join me on there on our channel, The Oracle Whimsy, every Tuesdays, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And I will be back here next Monday, same time, same place. Thank you, Joyce. But I'll be here same time, same place. Try to be on time instead of 8 minutes late like I was today, but I couldn't get my Wi-Fi to work. I was having all kinds of technical problems. So sure, we can talk about Laugh In next week. Yeah, absolutely. Just bring it up and we'll go from there. And anyway, I'm going to sign out for now, and I'll see you next week. Same time, same place. Thank you again.